All right, welcome to your December 2023 HOPE meeting. We had every intention of your co-chairs running the meeting more than me, but Catherine had a last-minute emergency and Sarah Devine is sick. And so I'm going to step in just to facilitate. But typically, we'd love to have the co-chairs playing more of an active role in the facilitation of the meeting going forward. But for this last time, I'll go ahead and talk you through it. And I want to respect our guests' time and get you all going. So let me go ahead and screen share. Okay. Give me just a sec, folks. All right. And for anybody who hasn't muted their mic, can you please go ahead and do so so we don't get any feedback on the audio? If you're interested in doing a public comment, can you please type into the chat your name and that you want to do a public comment and on whatever topic you might like to comment on. I'll give a few minutes before we start the meeting so that you have a chance to do that. And I didn't see anybody call in on the phone, but I'll check again in case there's somebody else who wants to do a public comment on the phone. So your meeting for today, your only order of business is really to approve your minutes from October. There was no November meeting. We've got wonderful community updates planned for you today. Sean Collins is here from Unity Shelter to share an update. Peggy McGuire is going to talk about the continuum of care status. And then I have some updates from the city of Corvallis to share on behalf of Brigida and Paul and their team. We have a brief educational component that's more of an update on the HOPE bylaws and the 4123 strat plan. And then for the remainder of the time, and we might not need all of the meeting time today, a discussion about HOPE board advocacy that was brought at the October meeting, and I'll ask someone from our HOPE Executive Committee to lead that discussion. It was going to be Catherine. So if you're on the Executive Committee and you can lead that discussion, I'll ask you to step in. Okay. The agreements for the culture of this meeting of kindness and inclusivity and curiosity and respect and open-mindedness, just a reminder at the beginning of every meeting. I'm going to stop screen sharing and see if there's anybody who would like to make a public comment. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. There is a question, Cindy, about that training. If you can answer that in the chat or any information you have on that to answer that offline, that would be great. Is there anybody who's called in on the phone who wants to make a public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward. Thanks all. So for your October minutes and for your roll call, are there any changes to your October minutes that any board member would like to make? I received none via email.
Julie, I'd like to move to accept the minutes as written.
Thank you, Peggy. Is there a second?
Second, Nancy Wise.
Thanks, Nancy. Catherine cannot be here tonight. Carol, how do you vote on the minutes?
I approve.
Thank you. Bruce?
Approve.
Alice, I don't believe I saw her here today. Alice, have you joined? Okay. Ricardo is on a family vacation. Brian, I saw you here. Are you able to chime in?
I'm here, but I paying for the minutes. I wasn't at that meeting.
Thanks, Brian. I don't think Cade is here. Cade, are you here? All right. Sarah is excused. Anita Earl's excused. Matt, how about you? I know I saw you here, Matt, but I can't hear you if you're trying to talk. Okay, well, Matt Easdale is here, but Matt, if you could please vote in the chat because I'm not picking up any audio from you. Joel?
Approved.
Thank you. I haven't seen Aaron here yet. Aaron, have you joined? Okay, Ari is excused. Barbara, are you here? Okay. Bria? All right. Cindy?
Here and approved.
Thank you. Peggy?
Here and approved.
Andrea is excused. I forgot to put that in here, but she had an appointment that she did let me know about. Andrea is excused. Ilea?
Approve.
Thank you. Nancy?
Approve.
Thanks all. Your minutes are approved. So I've got a cool update before we hear from Sean. I'm sorry to make you wait, Sean. For anybody who hasn't muted their mic, can you please go ahead and mute it because I'm getting a little feedback. The county has a new website and it's pretty. But all your old links and bookmarks, if you save bookmarks on Google or Chrome or wherever, I'm still getting feedback from someone's audio if folks could please mute themselves. Your bookmarks will not work anymore. You're going to get an error. But the link to sign up for Hope News and Updates, that's the same. And the Hope Advisory Board link should redirect you already to the new page. And the former housing and homelessness page is now under Health in Benton County. So I wanted to just show you really quick because our communications team has worked so hard on this. I want to highlight their work. It's just a beautiful new website for Benton County. And it's coordinated homeless response. And right up top, if you need help, go to CSC. If you want to look at statewide stuff, League of Cities, some why, what, and how, the structure. So the advisory board, the executive committee, and coordinated homeless response office, the work that we're doing at the staff level. And then recent news, so you can see links to recent news here and subscribing to the newsletter. And if you click on the Hope Advisory Board, that's where folks can learn more about attending meetings. So here's Hope Board, and it tells you here's how you can attend the upcoming meeting. So hopefully it's pretty user-friendly and folks can navigate it well. So I just wanted to take a minute to share that. Any questions about the new website? Are folks having a real tough time? I got a couple of phone calls, so just wanted to make sure our board members can access it. Okay, moving on. Community updates tonight. We've got Sean Collins and Peggy and a City of Corvallis update. So I will stop screen sharing. And Sean, please take it away and introduce yourself for folks who don't know you yet. And thank you for being here.
Great. So are you able to see my slides okay?
Yep, it's coming up perfectly.
Great. So Sean Collins, I'm the Executive Director of Unity Shelter, and apologies to folks who might have seen presentations from me before, and maybe the good news is I usually have about 30 slides. I don't have that many tonight. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview about what we are and where we fit in the spectrum of need in the community. So as you all know, you've got a big spectrum of need in the community, from the folks who are unsheltered and unhoused all the way up to affordable home ownership. Our sweet spot is really serving the unsheltered through the hygiene center and then emergency shelter and transitional housing. So that's where our focus always is. It's probably the most visible area of homelessness and need, but there is need across the bigger spectrum as well. Our mission is really providing safe shelter through collaborative care. The language of that may change a little bit in 2024. Our board's going to go through a little bit. We are actually in January, we will be 4 years old. So the board wants to take a look at mission and vision and just make sure that we're still really aligned on all of that. But it's, our values are really around collaboration and trying to engage with the community effectively and make sure that there's safety, both for our guests and for the broader community around us and for our staff and volunteers, obviously. Just to give you a sense of that range of services that we provide, and I won't read all of this, but all of our services are essentially low barrier services, meaning that people can come and get access to the services if they're having trouble with sobriety, if they're experiencing mental health issues, or if they have other issues. That's okay. It's really a matter of, can you behave in a way that is safe for other people to be around? And so, and that's true for both the shelter, the unsheltered services, all the way up through transitional housing. The difference in our transitional housing program is really that we do have a couple of sites that are clean and sober. And so if somebody is needing to practice sobriety and be around other people who are practicing sobriety, we do have some options available for that. But that's totally at the discretion of the folks that we enter into the program. It's not a requirement of our services that they be clean and sober. The unsheltered services are busy, and you know, all of these are pretty busy. But the unsheltered services, we and the drop-in center both see a lot of folks who are unsheltered in the community, a lot of drive-up folks. So there's a lot of people that come in and they're sleeping in their car, or they're coming in from places where they're couch surfing, et cetera, to get access to services. Kind of that arch across the top of this slide is really to highlight the traditional health workers that we've got on staff. We've got 2 right now, and we're going to be adding a 3rd, hopefully within the next 2 weeks. And those folks really work across all of these programs. And the intent of the traditional health workers is to really help connect people with the healthcare services that they need in the community, whether it's getting them signed up for Oregon Health Plan, getting them signed up with a primary care provider. We will go to appointments with people. We'll help if they're in the hospital and they need somebody to be an advocate for them, or in any of the healthcare settings. Then that's part of the work that those traditional healthcare workers do. And that's been we'll have 3 very soon. I could easily have 12 and keep them busy all the time, because that's a huge need in the community. So let me talk a little bit about kind of what's happened this summer and into the fall, and then kind of where we're at right now. So in June, if folks didn't know, we ended up really closing down shelter operations at our men's shelter facility at 211 Southeast Chapman. We also scaled back on the hours that we offered the hygiene center services there, but we were able to keep them open. And we opened a co-ed shelter at Room at the Inn for about 25 men and 25 women, which was great to be able to do that. But it was definitely, you know, we had 50 beds at the men's shelter before we made this move. And by doing it, there were definitely people we could not serve in that facility for a variety of reasons. And also it limited our capacity for women. And so big change there, a big something that we expected to take about 2 months until we got our funding back in shape. It took 5. And so we had to really make cuts both in staffing and operations across all of our programs to be able to achieve about between 75 and 100K in savings every month. And that allowed us to run mostly off reserves. And we did get a very helpful grant from IHNCCO that really made a big difference. And we've got some small grants from the City Corvallis Social Service Fund. The money that's come to us from the H.O.P.E 5019, House Bill 5019, is really something that was done in collaboration with the Coordinated Homeless Response Office. And we also got some direct funding from OHCS, and that's going to allow us to return to full service in all our programs through March and through 2025 at the men's shelter. The H.O.P.E 5019 funding, and there's kind of 2 pots. The H.O.P.E 5019 funding that was applied for through the what was called the shelter addendum, and then there was a separate pot of money that was directly for shelter operations that's really funding the balance of our programs, basically. That effort to get the 5019 funding really started this summer across Oregon with local planning groups. Our coordinated office was the local planning group here. We submitted a plan through the coordinated office for both rapid rehousing dollars and shelter dollars. The money that was granted was a significant reduction from our original ask, but it was still enough to be able to reopen, do some renovations, and expand capacity for women at Room at the Inn. So we're in a lot better shape now than we were. The renovations that are going to happen at Men's, we will be working. We've got plans. We've worked with an architect to get our plans together, but we are going to do another scrub on those plans in January and make sure that we're really doing all the things that we need to do there. The primary target is to add toilets and showers to that building. So right now, inside the building, there's only 2 toilets and 1 shower. We need to have 1 toilet or urinal for every 10 people that we have in shelter. So we need at least 5. And really, we should have more than that. And then we need showers for those folks too. So we will be adding significant shower and toilet capacity there. The Benton County shower trailer has been kind of helping make up that difference, and porta-johns have been allowed for a long time. But for year-round operations, it just doesn't make sense to continue to operate out of those temporary facilities. So as I said, we've gotten through the shelter operations funds, we got money for room at the inn, for 3rd Street Commons, Safe Place, and the emergency hotel shelter program. That money really only goes through March. And but we are told that the governor in the short session is asking the legislature for additional money that would go into shelter operations to keep existing shelters going. So we're very hopeful that the legislature can do its job. I just wanted to have a quick slide up about our partnerships in the community. We work with a lot of folks that are represented on this board and elsewhere. We've got a lot of churches that work with us in terms of the microshelter program, work with the Drop-In Center, Good Samaritan, the health department, the veteran services, et cetera. It's a long list, and we really rely on those partnerships a lot. That mission statement that says, safe shelter through collaborative care, this is part of the collaboration. It takes a lot of folks working together to try and really wrap around people and provide the safety and security that they need. And I think, yep, that's the end.
Thank you so much, Sean. If you can stop screen sharing, we have plenty of time for questions, and I really appreciate the broad overview you gave. Thank you. Questions for Sean?
I can break out the 30 slides if it's helpful.
I have a question.
Go for it, Carol.
I have 2 questions. One simple one. So the shelter on Chapman is now open, the men's shelter?
It is. We reopened on December 4th.
Okay. Given that you're grant relying a lot, what's the long-term sustainability plan? Do you think you just every year going to hustle up the grants, or do you have, because when part of the reason for closing was that weird gap that we had. So and that's tough on everybody. So what's the thinking if you have a plan?
Well, that's a really good question, Carol. And I think that, part of this is the life of the nonprofit. Exciting as it is, we can serve a lot more people, but we're not selling widgets. So it doesn't actually generate more revenue for us typically. So we are always going to be in the grant business, whether it's state grants or foundations or, other private sources, we're always going to be on the hustle for funds. I think that the mix of funding that we have right now, and this is definitely, this is a year where we had, very painful object lesson in this, is that we need a more diverse mix of funding streams to be able to make sure that we don't get in the kind of crunch that we were this year. We were remarkably lucky that we had the reserves that we did, and that we had a couple of key things land at the right time. But I can tell you that from June through really the end of November, roughly every day and certainly every month when we met with the board, we had discussions about whether or not to close everything. We had at one point, before we started to get some funding in November, we had about 4 weeks of money in the bank. And that would have gotten us through a month of payroll, and then we would have had enough money to basically, pay rent on a couple of spots and to basically hold our properties. But we were very close to just being insolvent. So we are working very hard to expand our development efforts, both in terms of working with donors, but also to make a lot more contacts with foundations, et cetera. I think that for shelters across the state, and Peggy could comment on this, I'm sure, shelters across the state were really crossed up by the way that the funding streams changed this year. There was money available, but they totally reworked the channels that you had to get that money through. And they put some rules around some of the money initially that made it very tough, right? The HB 5019 money that we got through the shelter addendum, that was only available if you were adding shelter beds in your community. And we were, and I think a lot of feedback from the state saying, look, you're funding new shelter beds, but at the same time, you're starving the existing shelters, and that's where a lot of that shelter operations funding kicked in. So I think my sense, you kind of hope that this is true, is that the state is learning a lot right now about what it takes to keep a shelter system running, how much it costs, how simple or complex to make the funding streams. And we're all learning about like how vulnerable we are to the politics of the day.
So we don't foresee a time when we won't need a shelter because we have housing for everybody.
How far out would you like
that's our goal, is that everybody will have a shelter, but you're talking about plans that'll go out 2 or 3 years. So that seems less optimistic than we would it's just, I guess you're being realistic, and our goal sometimes everybody having a home is not as optimistic, not as realistic as it could be.
Well, Carol, I guess I would say this. Peggy's got her hand up, so she may have some other things to say there. I think that there are some fundamental economic realities at play right now that mean that we are going to see a continued increase in the number of people who are homeless, and not a decrease. I think we need to build a lot more affordable housing. I think we need to do a lot of things, but we can't build our way out of this solely, right? We have an opioid crisis that is dramatic and growing. We have an economic structure that does not actually support you cannot get housing with a McDonald's income, right? And so we need more jobs for low-skilled workers. We need higher wages. We need more affordable housing and supported housing. We need a lot of things to be able to get out of the current crunch. So, unfortunately, this is a growth industry for a while. I would really like to be out of business, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Thank you.
Peggy, you had your hand up. I don't know if you.
I do, and I did, and I wanted to jump in. So thank you. You read my mind, Sean, I'm sure. I totally 100% agree with everything that Sean said. The other thing that I would like to add, or several other things I'd like to add to that, is that right now the education system is in crisis financially. And people are just, and when I say people, I mean legislators, elected officials, the general population. People are tired of the issue of homelessness, and it's not going away. Sean is 100% correct. It's getting worse. We have more and more people falling into homelessness. The fastest growing population falling into homelessness are seniors, because they simply can't afford the housing they're in. And now with all of these other areas that people are finding as their primary focus that they're concerned about, with education being a primary one, there's going to be a lot of competition for funding. And I don't see homelessness as being something that people are going to be excited about and want to fund. They're like, we've thrown a lot of money at this. Why haven't we stopped homelessness yet? Well, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about is that huge amounts of dollars are being carved out for building more affordable housing. And as we all know, that takes a long time. But the problem that I see from where I sit, and I'm sure Sean sees this as well, we can't keep people in the housing. When we get folks who have these very high, very complex needs off the streets into housing with multiple wraparound services, we just can't keep them in the housing because they end up blowing out. An example, we had somebody who, and I may have told you this, so you can stop me if I did. It's an 80-year-old man owned his home in Sweet Home or Lebanon, I don't recall. His wife died, he met somebody, he moved her into his housing with him. She was homeless. She convinced him that he had poisonous fumes coming from the walls, so he stopped paying his mortgage. The house was foreclosed upon. They both became homeless. He has some acute health issues that require wound care. They came to CSC. We got them into a motel, got them immediately in the pipeline to get into some rental housing. Every place they looked, the landlords were so nervous about the behaviors and the actions and the things that these folks said that we had a hard time getting landlords to accept them. We found a landlord who would accept them. They spent a few nights in the housing and they came back in and told us, yeah, we've moved out of there. There's poisonous fumes coming from the walls there too. We got them back into another motel because we're, very clear that this gentleman has got some serious problems. And they came back that afternoon and said, oh, we can't stay in the motel. Somebody in the parking lot was smoking in their car, and we can't be around that. And this is the kind of thing that we deal with day in and day out with the level of chronic and persistent mental illness, with all of the different, just multiple occurring issues. And so you can see that even if we can get somebody in housing, we can't necessarily keep them there. I don't have high hopes for building more housing as being the actual solution.
Thank you, Peggy. Can I add one thing to Carol's question about sustainable funding for shelter operations? The state is really working on what that means. And Sean, you touched upon that, but a lot of the feedback that Rebecca Taylor and I have been giving to OHCS, and then also, talking with folks at IHN and the healthcare world, how much it costs to run shelter and transition people out of homelessness. And it costs different amounts for different populations. So what it costs Sean at the men's shelter might be different than what it costs Greg at COI, than what it costs Andrea for permanent supported housing. And for the first time in my 4 years here, which is nothing compared to many of your careers in this field, is OHCS reaching out to say, well, how much does it cost? How many beds do you have? What's the amount per bed? How many beds could you add for what amount? And what types of beds? So they're really trying to learn. So I'm going to be interested to see in the short session and then upcoming regular sessions, what does that mean for sustainable state funding from OHCS or elsewhere, now that they're learning how much it actually costs to sustainably run shelter. So I'm hopeful for the first time from my vantage point because of the questions that OHCS is asking. Here's hoping. Other questions for Sean?
Julie Coquille has her hand up.
Thank you. Coquille, we typically only do questions from board members, but there aren't any board members with other questions and we have time. So please go ahead and share your question. I'm interested. And Coquille, I can't hear you if you're trying to ask your question. There you go.
I'm sorry, I was trying to find the button to unmute. And so I'm hearing a lot about the struggle with housing people that are struggling with mental illness and crisis. I am personally impacted by that. My son is 26 years old with schizophrenia, and in the huts in Sweet Home, waiting to be placed in adult foster care. So my question for you is, are you working with the adult foster care system at all?
So, I guess the answer to that is probably a little bit mixed. So the Unity Shelter partners with Corvallis Housing First for the case management services, and our traditional health workers are, you kind of hold hands with those case management staff very carefully. We've got a lot of folks, I think, in the community that we serve that need either assisted living or adult foster care, et cetera. And access to those beds is very limited. We do not have enough. We're not building enough. I think that it's a crisis that is only going to grow, particularly as we see that aging population enter into homelessness that Peggy mentioned, because it's not just the mental illness that's a significant challenge. It's also physical illness that's really hitting a lot of our folks. I mean, if I did a quick survey across the roughly 160 beds that we operate, a really substantial portion of the folks that we serve are over 50 and experiencing health issues that a 70-year-old would typically face. So we see Parkinson's and dementia and, really bad congestive heart failure, high blood pressure, diabetes, et cetera, that it can just be debilitating. And I don't think, I'm trying to think of the last time we actually placed a person in assisted living. It's pretty rare. So it's a big need.
Thank you, Sean.
I would
for the
like
question,
to just
Coquille.
if I could jump in on that too, is another issue that I'm hearing from colleagues around the state who are shelter operators and special permanent supportive housing operators is that they're having a harder and harder time getting the insurance that's required to cover their services and their facility where people are staying. And those prices, if they can get insurance, are going up like 75, 180%. And there are fewer and fewer providers who are covering them. And it has to do with fear of what might happen more so than just what has transpired, because many of these folks haven't even had any claims. So there are a lot of other factors that are involved in providing these services that are coming into play that there doesn't seem to be at this moment in time a way to deal with.
Are there any other questions for Sean about his update or anything else going on with Unity? Sean, any last words from you based on the discussion?
Nope, just thank you. Good questions. Very much appreciate that and appreciate the time to be here today. But if you have any questions about Unity Shelter and what we're up to these days, you can always send me email at director@unityshelter.org.
Thanks, Sean. Would you mind putting your email in the chat so we have it recorded in the transcript? Thank you. And Sean, if you want to stay, Peggy's up next with the Continuum of Care update. And then after that, I think it's everything that you've already heard before. So thanks for being here. Okay, we're going to transition over to Peggy. And Peggy, I've got a couple of visuals that you shared. Want to make sure to bring them up in case you would like to reference them. So the two visuals I have are the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care and just directing folks to some recent media coverage. And take it away.
Thanks, Julie. And Sean, you can jump in on my presentation if you want, since I spent so much time jumping in on yours. So folks, actually, Julie, if you would advance that to the next slide that's got the map. I have a canned presentation that I've been giving to every single city council in the Tri-County region. I've been to 22 municipalities so far. And I'll give you some outcome information on that. But the presentation that I've given them kind of gives them the basics of what is a continuum of care. Because if you don't live, eat, and breathe this stuff every single day, it's very confusing. There's so many things happening. There are the HB 5019 local planning groups. Sometimes those overlap with the House Bill 4123 groups. Sometimes they don't, just depends on which county that you're in. There's also other local groups, like in Lynn County, there's a group called the Heart Board, and they are basically a group of homeless service providers, and they do everything from shelter to specific services to they have support services to they have some elected officials participate, some mental health and public health officials. There is our Corvallis our Coordinated Homeless Response Office. There is in Lincoln County, the Lincoln County Homeless Advisory Board. In Lynn County, the MAC group, the Multi-Agency Coordinated Group, is required by the governor because of the funding, and that's the local planning group. So there's all kinds of things going on, and people don't often understand how they intersect with one another. But what I can tell you is in order to receive HUD funding or participate in the national competition for HUD funding, which is a grant competition, you must belong to a continuum of care. And that's a term that HUD uses not just for a spectrum of services and housing, but to define a local planning entity that is talking about homelessness and housing, that really is a think tank for the community to really discuss the issues and make plans for the issues, to strategize how we address those issues in the community. And the continuum of care can be whatever we want it to be. So if a group says we want our county to have their own continuum of care, that's fine and dandy. You register with HUD as a continuum and you say, we are a continuum of care. Here's the leadership, here's the structure, here are the things that we're doing. But there are certain things that you must do. You must oversee the point in time count that HUD requires every year on the third week of January. And that's the count of all the homeless folks. You must have a homeless management information system that is selected from among a group of systems that are approved by HUD to collect and store your data about the clients that you're serving, about the services that you're providing, about the members of your network. You must have a coordinated entry system. And people often confuse that with a wait list. It's not a wait list. Some of the people on a coordinated entry list will never, ever obtain housing because there just isn't sufficient housing. But what the coordinated entry list does is as you identify individuals who are homeless in the community, you meet with them, you talk with them, you use a HUD-approved questionnaire, and you ask a series of questions, input the data, and the results of that the responses that you get from this questionnaire helps you assess the vulnerability of the client. And then that client list is organized by vulnerability. So the most vulnerable clients, the ones who are most likely to die if they're out on the streets and living in an unsheltered situation, are the ones who are the top of the coordinated entry list. And the ones who are most likely to be able to solve their own problem and kind of get back into housing without any other services, they're at the bottom of the coordinated entry list. And the reality is that most of the people that we serve in these groups of folks who are participating in the H.O.P.E board, who are participating as providers in our community that you know about, are serving people who are kind of in the middle. So we're doing this work, and we are part of the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care, which Julie had the map up for us. It's a balance of state continuum. So there are some discrete continuums of care, and those are the gray areas on this map. So down at the bottom, we have Jackson County. Up at the top, we've got Multnomah County, Clackamas County, and Washington County. In the center, we've got Deschutes, Jefferson, and I'm missing one county. And then we've also got Marion and Polk counties. So those are discrete and distinct continuums of care that are registered with HUD already. The blue counties on this map are all the rest of the members of the balance of state continuum. So 26 very disparate counties that are one continuum of care. And the problem with this structure is that your continuum of care gets to make decisions for the member entities. So they get to decide who gets to apply in the annual competitive funding proposal or funding application. They get to decide what questionnaire, what tool we use to assess vulnerability. They get to tell us how to manage our coordinated entry process and how to manage our homeless management information system and how to do our point in time count. So a lot of power is given to the decision making of that body. For the longest time, we've just kind of drifted along, participating in the rural Oregon continuum of care. It seemed to make sense. A lot of other rural communities were in that continuum, and we were more like those communities than we were the more metro communities. But what's happened over time is that we've had increasing situations where that leadership of that 26 county continuum is holding back the group. So HUD gives like a report card to the continuum of care, and they rate and rank each continuum based upon their performance of how many people became homeless in the continuum each year. How many people did you get out of homelessness successfully? How many people stayed housed? How many people fell back into homelessness? How many runaway and homeless youth did you have? How many homeless veterans did you have? How many people who were unhoused got a job and then were able to be stabilized? And when you look across that entire 26 county region, the capacity is very different in every single county. So in some counties, really like one of the few service providers is the Community Action Agency, an organization like mine, or maybe only the Housing Authority, or maybe only some small faith-based organizations. And that does not bode well for that report card. We consistently rank low, and we consistently are told we can't apply for certain funding in the cooperative and competitive process. And we have to subordinate our desire to apply in those processes because the other counties don't have the capacity to participate, and it's one for all and all for one. If one community wants to apply for something, everybody in the continuum has to participate. So as time has gone on, it's become more and more difficult to achieve the goals that we want to achieve in our Tri-County area with being members of that very large continuum of care. About 5 years ago, there was some interest in pulling out of the rural Oregon continuum of care, but it hadn't been done before. HUD has consistently given extra points in this very, very competitive process to areas that combine continuums to form a larger continuum of care because it's easier for HUD to administer. HUD's dealing with one entity then. So Marion and Polk counties decided they were going to pull out of the rural Oregon continuum of care. HUD actually had to hire a technical assistant provider for the HUD Portland field office and for Marion and Polk counties to figure out how to do this. And so they've created a very good glide path. And still, I waited because what was happening was I was afraid that they were going to lose money. There's an ability for HUD to recapture some of the funding in a continuum and give it to a more highly performing continuum. And so what we were seeing was consistently money was being taken away from large continuums and being given to places like Los Angeles, San Diego, Chicago, New York, places that really had this work dialed down and had a very tight continuum because they had a small geographic region that they were serving. Well, Marion and Polk has continued to build their funding. They've achieved additional successful grant proposal awards, and I feel like the time is now on us to pull out of the large continuum and form our own. Additionally, with the executive orders that the governor made at the beginning of her tenure in her office, she has signaled, and she has continued to do so, that she is going to be sending money down through the continuums of care as opposed to the other traditional delivery systems for the funding. And that's what Sean was talking about in his presentation, that the governor suddenly shifted how this is going. And now all of a sudden people were scrambling because the traditional pipelines for funding were no longer there. So for example, CSC used to pass through a lot of our shelter funding to community partners because we don't operate shelters. That's not our area of expertise. And all of a sudden we didn't have any funding to pass through. So I've been on this big tour, and that's what that newspaper article was about, and asking each of the communities within the continuum of care, or within the region of Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties, to support the idea of a tri-county continuum with a resolution saying we support you. So far I have 22 municipalities of the 26 that I've visited that say, yes, we are going to, I'm sorry, take that back. Of the 22 municipalities that I visited, 6 have said they're unsure. They haven't yet made their mind up about it. 2 have flat out said no. And all the rest have said, yes, we support this, and I have resolutions. So I'm in the process of putting together a giant packet of materials that demonstrate that CSC is currently providing services related to the homeless management information system, and we will continue to do so. CSC is coordinating the annual point in time count across those 3 counties, and we will continue to do so. CSC maintains the coordinated entry list for the 3 counties. We will continue to do so. And now we're having to show that we have all of the documents, the policies, the committee set up, everything ready and poised for when we register as a continuum of care to be able to take off and do the work of a continuum as we pull out of the rural Oregon continuum of care, so that there's no lapse in the work that's happening in the communities. And then next year, probably sometime around summertime, and it's never at the same time of year, so it's always a question is when this will happen. HUD will announce their national competition, and then we will be in a position to be able to make in our Tri-County region some decisions for which of our providers are going to compete in that national competition. We'll do a collaborative application from our Tri-County continuum, and we'll submit those grant applications to HUD, and hopefully we'll be successful in obtaining additional funding and bringing it into our area. So that is one way that, when we were talking about the funding being difficult and challenging, continuing to get that direct HUD funding is really a helpful way to expand the resources that we have in our community beyond the state and local dollars. Trying to think, Julie, is there anything else I should cover? Any other questions you've been receiving from folks about the continuum of care or the process?
Not as much the process, but more the need and the benefits. And Peg, can you mute yourself while I'm talking? The need and the benefits that I have heard from service providers like Ann Craig from Jackson Street, or Andrea Myrie, or Sean, are vulnerability assessment tool, like the questions that we ask folks for coordinated entry. It's called the VI SPDAT. It's not good, and we all know it's not good, and it needs to change. And having the autonomy to change that SPDAT is controlled by the continuum of care. And so the Rural Oregon Continuum, they're looking at changing it too, but the process is going to be long, and all 26 counties have to agree. So having that local control to say, these aren't the questions we want to ask, here's what we do want to ask, that's been something I've heard from providers since I moved here. And then the other one is more has to do with the data tech system. And so Sean's organization, Unity, they use a tech system called Shelterware because they can track, who's in what bed, where are the case management notes, how long have they been here, who's talked to that person last. It's a shelter provider system that works really well, and they built it because there wasn't anything like that in our typical HMIS system that tracks all the data that we have to use for HUD. That's Service Point, and that's what Peggy has to use for all of the HMIS reporting. Well, Service Point can be built out to do everything that Shelterware does. But having the control to pay WellSky to build out Service Point to do that is out of our hands. And so far, the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care has not paid to build out Shelter Point that way, or Service Point. So Service Point can be Shelter Point and Case Management Point, and you can have it all in the same data system that gets reported to HUD, but we haven't been able to pay to do that and have that control, and which is why Sean's group created Shelterware to track everything that's going on at the men's women's shelter and Safe Place program. So I've heard consistently from service providers like, sure, we'd use HMIS way more often, but it doesn't meet our needs. So they have to do duplicate data entry just to track their clients and help them and get the money from HMIS type funding. So those were the two things I was going to add, Peggy. Yeah.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that. Another thing that we've noticed in our region is that, first of all, nationally, we know that the VI SPDAT, the tool that Julie was talking about, which stands for Vulnerability Index Service Provider Decision Tool. And that, I know it just rolls off your tongue, but like I say, that's how people are rated and ranked for vulnerability. But nationally, it's been determined that that particular tool actually lacks some elements that really are a problem related to equity. And so people often who are being asked the questions won't rate as highly in the coordinated entry process because of their racial or ethnic background and the way the questions are asked and the type of questions that are asked. And that's one of the driving factors that we've said locally, we would like to change that tool and use a tool that creates a more equitable outcome, because we know from the research that's been done that we have disproportionate representation of homelessness among the populations of people of color and certain ethnic backgrounds. So that's one type of decision. When we've tried to talk with HUD about some of these issues in the past, they say, well, we just don't understand. Plenty of balance of state continuums are operating just fine. They're highly performing. And I've said, okay, well, give me some examples of the ones that do, because then we could learn from them. And they're like, well, Connecticut. And I said, well, do you people in Washington, D.C. ever look at a map of Oregon? Because Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties is geographically roughly the same size as the state of Connecticut. So it isn't really applicable. And just that geographic disparity is really the problem that we run into. We are used to, in Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties, working together. CSC serves Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties. Our CCO, IHN CCO serves Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties. The COG serves Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties. We've got a lot of commonality and a lot of partnerships and a lot of organizations that serve those three counties from that one umbrella organization. So I feel like that's the other reason why it makes sense for us to have the three counties together in that region. We did have the opportunity to go in with Marion and Polk counties. I told you when they went out 5 years ago, they had talked with us about going in with them. But one, there wasn't the same flexibility about decision making if we were with a larger group. So that would have been a 5-county continuum, and they do have some differences as compared to our region. And like I said, I was concerned about the possibility that we would lose funding. So because I deal with this every day and I'm always in the weeds with it, I'm not sure if I've answered folks' questions. So I'm happy to answer anybody's questions that they may have.
Do we have any questions from board members about what's going on with the continuum of care? Anything else Peggy shared? And Peggy, at the last agenda item for this meeting is about opportunities for advocacy or any advocacy that individual HOPE board members are doing. And so I'm going to kind of jump the ship here and just say, from your perspective on the continuum of care topic, are there upcoming advocacy opportunities if HOPE board members would like to personally advocate at the local level or through friendships or other ways that you might need in this continuum of care process?
Well, I'll just say two things about that, Julie. That one, like I don't know why I never went to every city council meeting in the past, because boy, oh boy, have I learned a tremendous amount, and what a wonderful experience it's been. I cannot tell you how many people who were just community members, when I talked about this and made a presentation to these city councils, would ask if they could speak, and they would talk about how much this is needed and talk about the issues of homelessness. People were deeply engaged. And so it is something that's interesting to people, and they do want to have a role in it. As far as the advocacy for this specific thing, right now I've mentioned getting those resolutions from the different communities, and that was an important piece because I have to make sure that this doesn't look like I cooked it up in my garage on my own, that the communities that I serve really, really do want to have this arrangement of our own region as a continuum of care. But I will be sending out requests to many of our provider partners, whether they're housing provider partners, whether they're board members here, and participating in other organizations, whether they're supportive services providers, and asking for letters of support. I have a draft letter of support that we've written, and I'll be asking for folks to put that, sign that, run that past your membership or your board or whoever is the decision-making body for your organization, and then get those back to me so I can include those in the packet.
Thank you, Peggy. Any other questions from board members or non-board members or comments about this?
I know it's such a scintillating topic that you'll probably be talking about this for hours after the meeting, but
It's so important, but you're right, it can get dry. It's definitely the data entry date. And Peggy, people are saying great work in the chat. It's a really much needed effort, so thank you for doing it.
I have to just say, I also found out how hard your Benton County commissioners work, because I ran into them at various city council meetings. I'm like, geez, you guys work so hard, and here you are going to city council meetings too.
I know when you said, like, I don't know why I didn't attend every city council meeting, because there's not 12 of you, Peggy. They start at 6 p.m. and they go forever. There's ones in Monroe, Albany, Adair, Philomath, Corvallis. Oh, we did that road show, and it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. Well, thank you, Peggy, and thanks, folks, for questions. Peggy, for the transcript, can you put your email in the chat in case folks have questions to follow up on this? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Yes, KEZI picked up the news about Unity, and I can share a link in the chat as well. I just received it right before the meeting. Thanks for the reminder. Okay. Peggy, way to go. Love the news coverage. The updates from the city of Corvallis. So this is Brigitte Olson's team. They're going to be hosting a hybrid class, so in-person and virtual class for folks who are interested in Corvallis's funding programs. They can't talk about specific funding once they're in the RFP process, the request for proposals, when they've released a specific funding process. And so prior to that, on January 11th, they're going to be at the Madison Avenue Meeting Room right across from City Hall, and there's also going to be a virtual option. The second update, during COVID, there were waivers for CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funding, saying you could use a large percentage of your CDBG funding on social services because there was a need. Those COVID waivers are gone. And so now they are back to the norm where they can only use about 15% of their funding. And that equates to about $82,000 total annually across any social services. The rest of CDBG, it needs to be brick and mortar, housing, buildings. The final and very positive update to share, the first units of affordable housing in Corvallis are coming online. They have 450 units in the pipeline, and Brigida, every time she says that, she says it's the most she's seen in her entire career at one point in time. And families are moving into those units that are just opening at 53rd and Country Club. And any details about that, I included a link there. Any questions about these updates from the city of Corvallis? And I probably can't answer the questions very well anyway. Brigida can, so please reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with the folks at the city of Corvallis who can. Okay, so I have included a brief overview update of the work that Rebecca and Libby have done. Most of this work happened while I was on leave, so I'm probably not going to be able to answer every question someone might have. And it's also high level because I know Rebecca briefed you all on this in October. But just what's going on with the HOPE bylaws, why they were amended, what's changing, and next steps. And this won't be as detailed as it was in October. But for folks who are tuning in to this topic for the first time, a House Bill 4123 a couple years back provided funding so that Benton County could create a coordinated homeless response office. What that means is really the staffing for the office, a project manager, and a research and writer for grants. And it also required that we have an advisory body. Thankfully, the HOPE board was already here. And so we are utilizing the HOPE board to meet these requirements. And part of this is also a strategic plan. So why were the HOPE bylaws amended? To have a clear distinction between operations, that means what staff do, our functions with our coordinated response office, and our policy advisory body, the HOPE board, really defining that role. And to have transparency for the system for improved community engagement. You know, the HOPE board does this. Let's have it be at public meetings where folks can tune in. So this is the previous structure where we had envisioned having an intergovernmental council based on what we learned in this whole process. It just didn't make sense to do it that way. It made the most sense to have the intergovernmental council function reside with the HOPE Executive Committee. And so now this new structure, our current structure, is really the HOPE board and the HOPE Executive Committee. And that Executive Committee is the liaison body with our elected officials and CSC and works hand in hand with our coordinated office staff. So it's more streamlined, it's more transparent, and it's really dialed in with feedback from the HOPE board. And then continuing your role as the HOPE Advisory Board, this forum, just like it happened here tonight, and having folks who are on this board continue to be the liaison back to their governing bodies, and going forward, having the HOPE Board give input on an ongoing basis, and more to come on that. So in October, Rebecca shared some next steps with you all of here's what we're doing. We're presenting to the BOC is the Board of Commissioners for Benton County, giving updates to City Council, having adoption at the city and county level. And all of these milestones have been met, and it's really because of Rebecca and Libby and April Holland. And then on Monday, we had our first meeting with the HOPE Executive Committee new members, folks from Philomath and our city manager from Corvallis. So that was exciting to finally launch that. The next steps of the work that we're doing, House Bill 5019, that funding that Sean talked about, it also includes funding for rapid rehousing. And so we're meeting tomorrow with our city and county partners to talk about what are the possible next steps for that rehousing funding. I don't have a good update yet, and we are working on it. We're working on it internally and with community partners to make sure that whatever we do aligns with the local planning group priorities, the feedback we got from folks. And then for House Bill 4123, that strategic plan, in January, the HOPE Executive Committee is going to meet to move forward that strat plan so we can get it adopted by the end of the month. That's going to be a huge focus of the month of January, and it's going to be TBD, to be determined if the HOPE board, the larger HOPE board, needs to meet in January with how much work we need to do on this that month. So also more to come on that. So I'll stop screen sharing and ask if there's any questions about that topic. The HOPE board role, the executive committee shift, the work we're doing right now. It's stuff that most of you have already heard, but I just wanted to check back in with you all and say we're doing what we promised we would do back in October and getting it done. Okay, no questions on that? Thank you. Okay, so the HOPE Board advocacy discussion. The HOPE Executive Committee is going to be giving some guidance on advocacy, and then HOPE Board members here, any of you, can provide roundtable updates on any of the personal advocacy you do and any upcoming opportunities for advocacy. So I'm going to go ahead and ask if any of our executive committee members here tonight can talk about what was determined as far as HOPE Board advocacy goes, that the HOPE Board itself is not an advocating body, but that personally you can do any advocacy you want. Nancy, can I tap you to chime in on this if you're at a place where you can talk about it?
Let's see, sure. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. What specifically would you like to know?
More just advocacy. You know, the HOPE Board as an entity is not an advocating body. What is their role? And then how can board members still advocate in their personal life? And then we'll go ahead and provide opportunities to share.
Sure. Well, I guess I would just say, if there's something that you're interested in, you can show up as a community member to, a city council meeting or to a board of commissioners meeting. You can send us emails, give us a phone call, advocate that way. But yeah, Julie, like you said, the HOPE Board is not an advocacy group. So, and if you do testify or provide comments and identify yourself as a HOPE advisory board member, make sure that you also say, but I'm here, testifying as an individual, because we just don't want to get into any of those sticky situations, if that makes sense. Is that
mainly
helpful?
because the HOPE Board is an advisory body to the city of Corvallis and Benton County. So in this context, that's the role of the HOPE Board. But anybody on the HOPE Board, do as you like.
And I always encourage people to be polite and professional.
At HOPE meetings as well.
Yes.
And then roundtable opportunities. So I know that a lot of folks on this board, Carol, I'm thinking of you, and Cindy, you as well. You advocate on certain topics, whether it's homelessness, housing, supportive services. So if there's an upcoming advocacy opportunity, this is where I was asking you, Peggy, are any of those 2 or 6 municipalities in Benton County, and you can share an opportunity with the HOPE Board of where they can advocate things like that. So please go ahead and chime in. You don't even need to raise your hand.
I just wanted to say that the 2 that were problematic were Brownsville and Scioto, and I don't know that any amount of advocacy will assist in that matter, but I think the other comments that I'd like to make, very much piggybacking on what Nancy was saying, is that you know, many of us do hear about opportunities where some advocacy can help, issues that are coming up on different city council agendas, county council agenda, or county commission agendas, opportunities to connect with media about different things. And so I think that that was what generated this conversation, that if we are aware of these things and are able to share them with one another, that it really does open the door for us to appear as private citizens and say that we have an interest in seeing this happen, or to be able to share our interests with other people that we know who might also be willing to stand up and be counted in some of those situations.
Thank you, Peggy. Any other advocacy efforts that Hope Board members are doing on a personal level? Carol, I'm guessing there's something with the League of Women Voters about this, but I don't know the answer. All right, any other folks?
I have a comment kind of more like tied to what I was saying previously. So one other little bit that I think is helpful as an elected official, if you're out there and you read something on social media, or your friend tells you something, or even if you read something in the Gazette Times and you think, wow, that's horrible, I can't believe our elected officials are doing that. I think it's really good to reach out to those elected officials and ask, hey, what's going on with this? Because I can't tell you how many times I've had people reach out and be mad, and kind of come at me or come at us with, you know, this anger, when really it's like, oh, well, that was just a misunderstanding, and we can clarify that and move forward. But that it takes more time. I guess once that level of anger is there, and you know, if people are upset and they want to kind of have a fight, it prolongs coming to a good outcome, I guess. So just always keeping what you hear and see with a grain of salt, and go straight to the source and find out for yourself.
Thanks, Nancy. I put a couple of links in the chat. The first one is that KEZI coverage. And the second one is an NBC 16 coverage of our press release on the topic of the shelter funding, so that you have direct links to both of those. Okay, well, that was it for your meeting this evening. I think my last slide was just a the central point of communications. I've included new links in the PowerPoint for the new website, and subscribing, and social media is remaining the same, so that you can direct people to it. And Peggy, thanks for your comment. Yeah, well said, Nancy. Any other advocacy opportunities that you'd like to share that you're engaged in with the Hope Board? Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here tonight. We'll go ahead and end early. It'll be TBD whether or not there is a January Hope Board meeting based on everything we need to accomplish in January with the strategic plan and the executive committee. So I'll be sure to reach out in the first couple of weeks of January with an update about that. Misha, thanks for being here and listening in. And yeah, happy holidays for any folks who celebrate any holidays. And I hope you get to enjoy some time this winter. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.